So, MK Czerwiec, also known as Comic Nurse, some people, you run the Chicago branch of Laydeez Do Comics and do a fantastic job. Some people here tonight won't really know much of your backstory. So, where do you come from? What's your story?
I was born.
In a nutshell, in a sentence.
You got to say that part with me. I'm from Chicago. I originally went to school for, I was going to be a writer, and then couldn't get a job being a writer. So I resisted the lifelong history that I was scheduled to do, which was to become a nurse, because my mom was a nurse, my family had illness, I'd been a caregiver, but I tried to resist it, I couldn't, because I can get a job as a nurse. And I thought, well, I'll be near really interesting stories, and that'll bring it all together. And so I became a nurse, and I found myself at that time in history in HIV/AIDS care. And so at the peak of the AIDS epidemic in Chicago, I worked on an AIDS unit as a nurse for 6 years. And that period of time was very formative and influences the work I do, because in a way to cope with how things happened there, I started making comics, because words alone weren't working, images alone weren't working, and somehow one day I stumbled into the fact that if you make a few boxes and combine word and image, that comics actually worked incredibly well for me to survive as a person while doing caregiving that was so challenging.
And now it's, what do you call it? Because you turned this fantastic phrase, narrative...
narrative constipation. It's a theory I have that caregivers, we bear witness to so many stories, and yet we have to kind of keep moving. We can't, we have to have boundaries, but we sort of stuff these stories in. And if we don't address them and figure out a way, like for me making comics, to help deal with them, you can kind of end up a little impacted. And sometimes the stories can come out at inappropriate times.
So for you, comics is a narrative enema.
It's a narrative enema. That is correct. Yes, and that's about what it looks like.
And can you talk very briefly about matter mapping?
Oh, mattering maps are an idea I'm working with in conjunction with making comics about mapping one's way through a story and thinking in terms, not just geographic mapping, but just spatial mapping of creating maps that show us what's important, and using drawing as a way of knowing, which is another huge area of interest of mine.
And you're currently working on your long-form graphic novel about the stories collected during your nursing in the AIDS.
Which I've come to realize is a memoir. It's going to be a memoir of myself as an AIDS care nurse, because those are the only stories I really can explore and tell. But I'm bridging it with an oral history I did of this AIDS unit that I worked on. And I also, in the process, got a master's in medical humanities and bioethics, because I wanted that to inform the work I do in comics.
And you're also a comics educator.
And I'm also a comics educator. So in the process of getting that master's, I started teaching comics and drawing to medical students, and so right now I teach medical students, and then I also started teaching graphic memoir to undergraduate art students. So I have sort of literally a foot in the arts in teaching and a foot in healthcare and teaching. And
your other foot is as part of graphic medicine.
I only have 2 feet.
Is it your third?
My third appendage. Now you're getting too personal, Nicola. No, I will not.
Okay, let's just take in that eagle. Is that an eagle on top of your flag?
Yeah, but he's
your people's flags.
Just to do my country.
Okay, right. Yeah. Now get into position with that thing. Okay. So what did I just say? Oh yes. Graphic medicine, because you're part of the organising committee
for the graphic medicine conferences. Ian Williams founded the website graphicmedicine.org, and after coming to London, which was my first trip to the UK, I then organized a second one, and then since then have been part of that. Because Ian, it's very coincidentally, Ian and I both around the same time started exploring this as part of a master's in medical humanities.
That was it. So that's fantastic. That's all going strong. And my final question to you really is about what's Laydeez Do Comics for you? Why did you set out? Because we talked about that earlier.
I was listening to, I was asked to present at Laydeez Do Comics the second time I came to the UK for Thought Bubble. And I was so thrilled to co-present with Sarah Levitt. And really just what an amazing environment.
Sarah Leavitt.
Yeah, Leavitt. Leave it.
Like
yes.
the dog,
Like
leave
the dog
it.
command, leave it. Sarah, leave it. And I'm not sure that's right. I think that's how you people say it. I think our people say leave it.
Okay, well.
Whatevs. So, what was I talking about?
Well, and then you presented at Laydeez to
Presented at
Comics
Laydeez.
when we were in that cold...
Correct. And then I was listening to a podcast, the one from the Whitechapel, where you and Sarah were talking in a lot of detail about why you did it and everything. And I was so inspired by that whole, listening to the podcast became really important to me because I really wanted to stay connected. And I was walking down the street with my dog and I remember thinking, God, I wish I could start a chapter here, but I don't know anyone in comics. And then I thought, you idiot. That's why you would start a chapter here, because you know the women in comics in Chicago. And it turned out that that was so true. Within a year, I knew so many women in comics and had heard wonderful presentations. Our first year was...
Well, not just women.
Yeah, I was going to say,
men,
our
yeah.
first, if you wouldn't have interrupted.
Oh, God, sorry.
In our first year, there were women and men who presented. We had John Porcellino and Jeffrey Brown, and people who have ended up coming to this graphic and medicine conference. So, yeah, it was awesome.
Amazing. And just this time together we've had at the conference now, we've found some new cities around America, haven't we? We've got new blood for the Laydeez to Comics.
That's the plan.
So any one last thing? You've got about a few seconds to say one last greeting to all the people. I'll be playing this to a 500 strong audience.
No pressure. Shout out to all of my friends who I haven't seen in a while, including Paul Gravett, who was very missed at the Graphic Medicine Conference. I want him to know that. And I'm sure there's a lot more to say, but
Okay.
I just am so excited about celebrating the 5th birthday of Laydeez Do Comics, and we're sending our greetings from Chicago.
Thank you very much, MK. Bye.